Hello, good evening, good day, and welcome to the Ask Abhijit show, episode 142. I hope you're all doing very well. And as always, we have a whole lot of questions that we're going to discuss, questions that you all have asked in the comments and elsewhere. But as always, before that, let me greet you all and see who all is there with us on the live chat. I can see Auspicious Doomsday, Tathagat, Khushi, Rani, Deepak, Divyanshu, Nikhil, The Landmark, Venkat Reddy, R242, Manohar, Daddy Zhong, Tejas, Pranav, Max, Renzo, Yuvraj, Aditya, Roshan, Siddhant, Mazar, Fatty Just 8, IPs 10, Pranay, Bhanu, Chetan, Harsh, Shubham, Tanmay, Ramesh Chand, Pavan, Durga, Herbie on Wheels, Keshav, ex-KGB agent, Shaheen, Pankaj, Kumar Tyagi, Kishore, C4D2, Suman, Harsh Zaveri, Yo-Yo, Gogo, Satish, Siddhant, Never Satisfied, Akshay, Nandan, Ashwin, Shivansh, Rishav, Mango, Hindu, Sher Putin, Chiching, Vladimir Adityanath, Harvey Ropes, Aditi, Stone, 420, Jay Rana, the Prime Mover, Abhinav, Santanu, Mr. Jiga Chad of India, Satvik, Sarthak, Dungar Singh Chauhan, Tathagat, Abhijit Chavda Sindhabad, Raju Singh Azmanor, Om Naik, Zero, FBI, Sushma, Varun, Ajib Saladka, Chetan, Bhanu, Dadimir Adityanath, and lots of other people. Good evening, good day, all of you, and thank you so much for being on the show with me tonight, this wonderful, fine evening over here. So, with that done, let us get into the questions, shall we? Let's get right into the questions as always. Um, Okay, what's the first question? Here's the first question. It's by a number of people: Anantadev, Tyagi, Grimzobad, and Shaheen. How will the US midterm results affect India and the rest of the world? The US midterms is right around the corner. If the Republicans win the midterms now, how will it affect Ukraine? And what will the foreign policy be like towards India? Will it be a little bit better? And Shaheen says, what are your thoughts on the US midterm elections in 2022? How will their results impact India and the rest of the world's geopolitical landscape? Yeah, good question. So let's see what the results are like. I mean, I discussed this yesterday on the Indian Interest podcast, and let's see what the results are like. I mean, it was still not clear who's winning. Now it looks like the Democrats may be winning the U.S. Senate. So let's see what the results are like right now. Yes, here we are. This is the current scenario. The Senate results, officially it's 48-48. Democrats 48. Democrats are in blue, and the Republicans are in red. You need 51 for a majority. So it looks, I mean, in some places I'm hearing that the Democrats are winning, but over here it looks like it's still not yet decided. So this is the situation in the US Senate, which is the upper house, and the lower house is the US House of Representatives. It's 211 for the Republicans, 203 for the Democrats. So yeah, it's still not quite clear who's going to win the elections, and which way it's going to go. It could be that the Republicans could have a very thin majority in the House, and in the Senate it could be either way. I'm sorry, in the House it could be the Democrats who may the Republicans, the Reds are the Republicans in the House of Representatives. It could be the Republicans who would get, most likely, possibly from what it looks like over here, a thin majority perhaps. And in the Senate, it could be the Democrats or the Republicans. We're not quite sure. So that's the situation right now. So the question is obviously very good. The question is, one second, yeah, here we are. So how will this results affect India and the rest of the world? Will it change the US policy towards Ukraine, to change the foreign policy towards India? How will this all impact the rest of the world and the geopolitical landscape? So from the geopolitics perspective, when we talk about the US foreign policy, the US is the most powerful nation in the world. It's the sole superpower, and that's why anything that happens in the US is going to affect the world. And the US foreign policy is something that every nation in the world needs to keep a very close watch on. Yes. So there are three scenarios. One scenario is that the Republicans win the upper house, the Senate, and the lower house. which is the House of Representatives. That seems unlikely. But if that happens, then there will be no impediment or obstacle towards the Republican Party framing any kind of legislation it wants and governing the country as they want. Yeah. So that is the optimum result for the Democrats, for the ruling party. The ruling party is are the Democrats. So if they win the upper house, which is the Senate, and the lower house, which is the House of Representatives, then the Democrats will have absolutely no impediment in ruling the country for the next 2 years any way they want, and for framing any kind of legislation that they want. The other scenario is that the Democrats win the upper house, the Senate, and the Republicans win the lower house, which is the House of Representatives, which could make things very problematic for the Democrats who are currently, Joe Biden is a Democrat. Yeah. So it could make things difficult for them. They will not be able to pass any kind of legislation they want, and it could essentially make Joe Biden a lame duck president who is ruling only in name, but he cannot get any legislation or any policies passed. Yes, because if the lower house is controlled by the Republicans, then they will not allow that to happen. And if the Republicans win the lower house, as seems kind of likely right now, then they could launch all kinds of investigations on the Democrats, especially about the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, which is an interesting example. It was a chaotic, disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Yes, and they could also launch investigations into the conduct of Joe Biden himself and his son Hunter Biden. So it could be very, it could not be very nice. It could be, yeah, that's an uncomfortable situation for the ruling party, the Democratic Party. So that's what happens if the Democrats win the Senate and the Republicans win the House. The third scenario is that the Republicans win the Senate and the House. That's also a possibility. So if that happens, it's going to be even worse for Joe Biden and his Democratic Party. Yes, because in that case, there will be all kinds of problems cropping up for them, and they will essentially, Joe Biden will essentially be a completely, totally ineffective and lame duck president. So now, what does this mean for the world? Uh, when it comes to US foreign policy, it's typically the same, more or less the same, whether it's the Republicans who are in power or the Democrats. More or less the same, because much of the foreign policy, the bulk of the foreign policy, the core of the foreign policy is dictated from the Pentagon, not from the White House. The White House will do certain things. For instance, when Trump was president, he launched this trade war against China, and so you will have some effect from the White House, but overall the policy is run by the bureaucracy. The foreign policy is run by the bureaucracy, which resides in the Pentagon. Some people would call it the deep state or whatever they want to call it. Yeah. So typically, whether the Republicans are in power or the Democrats, the foreign policy remains more or less the same. It's an imperialistic foreign policy. It's a hegemonic foreign policy. Its objective is to sustain and preserve and perpetuate the US supremacy and hegemony over the world. Yes, protect the supply chains, protect the infrastructure, protect the dollar as the reserve currency, and wage wars wherever required in order to feed the military industrial complex, all of that. And no president would dare to go against that. Yes. So overall, I think that it will not change, even if, let's say, the Republicans are able to win the lower house and maybe even the upper house. It will not really change the foreign policy too much, the US foreign policy too much. Of course, when it comes to the presidency itself, well, historically, in recent times, like the past 2-3 decades, the Republicans have typically had a better approach towards India than the Democrats. So when we talk about Republicans, we're talking about people like Donald Trump, like George W. Bush. That's the two that come to mind. Yeah. And when we talk about Democratic presidents, we're talking about people like Barack Obama, and right now we have Joe Biden. So right now Joe Biden is the president, and the Americans have not appointed a governor, I'm sorry, an ambassador to India for nearly 2 years. That position is lying vacant, which is extremely strange because India is one of the major nations in the world. Yeah, I mean, nobody can deny that. And it's an emerging power, it's an emerging great power. It's a significant nation now, India, in global geopolitics, in economics and all that. And yet the Americans are not willing to appoint an ambassador to such an important nation. That kind of shows it's designed to convey certain signals and messages to India, yeah, and to the world as well, that they are not pleased with the way India is conducting its business, and the way India, I mean, whatever policies, domestic foreign policies, foreign policy, economic policies, etc., India is pursuing. The Democrats are not happy with it, and the U.S. Uh, foreign policy state department is not happy with what's going on, and typically when you have a democratic president, the approach towards India is a little bit harsher, and it's a little bit less friendly, it's a little bit colder, it's a little bit more antagonistic and adversarial, as opposed to when a Republican president is in the White House. Typically, it's like a change of maybe 5 to 10%. Overall, the foreign policy is more or less the same. I mean, when Mr. Modi was became prime minister in 2014, Mr. Obama was the president of the US, and Mr. Modi was able to establish a very good relationship with Obama. Yeah, and things were going well. And then when Trump came to power, Mr. Modi was able to establish an even better relationship with Mr. Trump. Right now, I don't know what sort of relationship is there with Mr. Biden. It's very hard to tell what happens with Mr. Biden, but yeah, that's how it is. So, and what about Ukraine? Well, I think even if the Democrats lose the House or even the Congress, I don't think the foreign policy towards Ukraine and Russia will change much. Yeah. So, um, so I don't think it's going to change much because, like I said, overall the foreign policy is dictated from the Pentagon, from the unelected bureaucracy that runs the foreign policy, the State Department. These people are essentially there for life once they get in, and and that's how it is. Yeah. So I don't think it's going to have much of a change, much of the foreign policy is going to change much. It is still going to stay more or less the same. There is a significant amount of bipartisanship when it comes to the foreign policy. The two parties, the Democrats and Republicans, they differ a lot, and they disagree a lot when it comes to domestic affairs, when it comes to domestic policy, gun control, abortion, women's rights, and whatnot, right? All those things. These are big issues when it comes to domestic policies and domestic politics, domestic issues. But when it comes to foreign policy, they are a very more or less very much aligned, bipartisan alignment when it comes to foreign policy. So I don't think it's going to affect India too much or the rest of the world too much, no matter what happens. But of course, if the Republicans are able to take over the lower house, let's say, then they could create a lot of trouble for Joe Biden and for the Democratic Party and the government. There could be government shutdowns like we saw in the past in the US. There could be investigations launched, like I said, which could be embarrassing or even damaging to the president and his family and to the Democratic Party. And a whole lot is going on. So even now, we're not entirely sure as to what direction this is going to take. Will the Democrats be able to win the Senate, the upper house? In some places, I hear that they've already won the upper house, but when you look at the Google latest scorecard or whatever you want to call it, it still says 48-48 when it comes to the Senate. And the upper house is, we have a Republican lead there. GOP 211 is opposed to Democrats 203. So it's still, I would say, a little early to call. Maybe in a few days we will have a better idea of what's happening. Until then, we will wait and watch, and I will certainly revisit this issue and look at it with fresh eyes, maybe by next weekend when we have the next set of live streams. So overall, I don't think, no matter what happens, I think that no matter what happens, it will not change US foreign policy much, because the president is still a Democrat, and the Pentagon still has its own views which don't change, and overall there is bipartisan agreement when it comes to foreign policy. So it's not going to change things too much. Okay, Himanshu says, since you've spoken in your episode with Ranveer that Donald Trump's contribution to the US has been lowest when compared to his predecessors, do you think he can still return to attain the top post once again after the Biden presidency term gets over? Nimit says, what are your views on the US midterm elections? Do you think this type of red wave can be seen in 2024 presidential election? Will Donald Trump do a comeback? So essentially, these two questions are about the future, the political future of Donald Trump. Will Donald Trump be able to run for presidency again in 2024? Will he declare his candidature? Will he throw his hat in the ring? and what else could happen? That's the question, right? Into that. The question is about Donald Trump and his. 1 second. Give me a second, please. I will get back into it right away. Once I can resolve the issue of the lag. We see this lag once in a while. Why is that? Let's look into it. 1 second. Is it better? Laggy, laggy. Come on. I think we're still lagging. We are still lagging, or are we fine now? We are fine now. Buffering, and it's back on track. I think it's fine now. So these two questions are about the political future of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is right now uh, the number one leader, you could say, in the Republican Party. And as of now, he's the most vocal, vociferous leader. Even though he has been banned from Twitter and other social media platforms, he has created his own social media platform called Truth Social, and he is very much active there. And yes, and he is positioning himself, or he is trying to position himself as the next Republican candidate for presidency. It is believed that he may announce his 2024 presidential candidacy very soon, maybe as early as this coming week, possibly. Yeah. So, what did I discuss on the Beer Biceps podcast with Ranveer? I did say that what I said was this. I said that Trump was not allowed to achieve anything. The entire political system seemed to be, it seemed like it was stacked up against him, and they did not want him to be able to achieve anything. He wanted to build a wall. They did not allow him to build a wall. He wanted to do various other things, and he was not allowed to do any of those things, right? Even his own party seemed to at times be, at cross purposes with him. And the reason for this is that he is not a politician. He's an outsider who accidentally was able to succeed in politics because he's smart, because he's intelligent, and he was able to do what the other politicians could not, and he was able to connect with the people, and democracy actually worked for once. That's what happened. And so that was the deal. So he was not really allowed to achieve any of the things he wanted to achieve. Now we have to understand what the situation with Donald Trump is. I spoke about this yesterday as well. What is going to happen to Donald Trump, and what's going to happen to his movement, the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again? We have to understand something very clearly. The current, see, the question is about a red wave. There has been no red wave. Everybody was anticipating a massive red wave or red tsunami. The Republicans will swamp the Democrats and gain a crushing massive majority in the lower house and the upper house in the Senate. This has not happened. It's still too early to call. If the Republicans do win, it's going to be with a razor thin majority, very small, tiny majority, which is not anywhere close to the 30-40 seats lead they were expecting to have. And the face of the campaign has been Donald Trump. He is the one big leader right now in the Republican Party. And that's why this is a big setback for Donald Trump. This essentially is the third straight election in which Donald Trump has failed to perform to his expectations and to the expectations of the Republican Party. The 2018 midterm elections, when Donald Trump was president, in those elections, the Democrats won the lower house. They gained more than 40 seats, and the Republicans were able to retain the Senate. But the Democrats won the House, and that was a setback for Donald Trump in 2018 when he was president. In 2020, he lost the presidency to Joe Biden, and the Republicans even won the Senate. So that was a double setback for Donald Trump. And right now in the 2022 midterms, there is a possible, perhaps slim majority in the lower house and maybe in the Senate It's still too early, I would say, to call. Yeah. And the US elections are weird. They go on for days and days. The last 2 3 seats are not announced for many days, and they are announced a little later. It's strange. It's a very strange electoral system. So these last three elections have been setbacks for Donald Trump. It's a hat trick of setbacks. He has come up short each time, which does not bode well for him. Yeah. So Trump is still positioning himself as the prime candidate for the 2024 presidential election. He may announce his candidacy soon. Yeah. But there are some challengers on the horizon. There is the governor of California, governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who could be Trump's top challenger for the 2024 nomination. And there's another guy called what's his name, the governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, who also is in some quarters is being spoken about as a potential outsider who could challenge Donald Trump. Yeah, so that's what's happening. It's still too early to say if Donald Trump will be able to, first of all, secure the Republican candidacy for president. And even if he's able to do that, which is going to be difficult, but even if he's able to do that, will he be able to win the presidency in 2024? We don't know. So the questions, there are multiple questions. First of all, who's going to lead the Republicans in 2024 in the presidential race? We don't know. Trump would want to do that. He really wants to do that. He's most likely going to announce very soon. But there are challenges to him because he has not performed well. The second question is who's going to lead the Democrats in the next presidential race? Joe Biden is the sitting president. He's only into his first term. So usually, I mean, typically, if the sitting president would run for the next term, for a second term. But Joe Biden is, well, people are raising questions about him, and it's very visible that he is in cognitive decline. So it's possible, perhaps, that he may not run for president in 2024. Will Kamala Harris run for president? Well, she's turned out to be as big a disaster as Biden himself. Yeah, she has not exhibited any presidential characteristics or any signs of significant intelligence, I would say. So that's a problem for the Democrats themselves. What's going to happen? Yeah. The other question is what happens. Will Biden become a lame duck president, or president only in name, if the Republicans are able to capture the lower house or maybe even the Senate? So we have all these questions upon us right now. So that's where we are. There is no guarantee that Donald Trump will be able to secure the Republican candidacy in 2024 in the presidential race. And even if he's able to, we don't quite know who. If he's able to do that, who will he be up against? There is a dearth of leadership in the Democratic Party. Will Hillary Clinton come back for the 78th time to run for president? We don't know. And there seems to be a leadership vacuum in the Republican Party as well. I did speak about Ron DeSantis and Larry Hogan. There could be some other people as well, but yeah, there's nobody who like stands out apart from Donald Trump. He has got this big personality. He's been president before. He's a very successful businessman, so he still could be in prime position, but we don't know. But the last three elections have been bad for Donald Trump. Nobody can gloss over that fact. So this is the situation. All these factors are there right now. It's still not clear. It's still 2 years away. Maybe in 6 months, maybe by next week, we'll know, perhaps, if Donald Trump is going to throw his hat in the ring. And maybe in a few weeks, maybe in a few months, the situation will become a little bit more clear as to what are Joe Biden's plans, what are Kamala Harris's plans, and who's going to stand up against Donald Trump within his own party to secure the 2024 presidential nomination. This is the situation. Very complicated. It's if you're an outsider, it's fun to watch. Yeah. So that's how it is. I mean, people who love elections and who are into the electoral politics, it's great for them. It's great fun for them. I look at it from a geopolitical angle. So yeah, so that's what I'm keeping an eye on. It's obviously important for the entire world what happens in the US. So we're gonna keep watching this closely. Yes. Okay. The next question is something I took yesterday. I spoke about this yesterday, but maybe in case some of you have not seen it, we will discuss this again. Rajat Kushagra Sumit. And the questions are, why did Putin back away from the Kherson region? Could it be a deception by him? As you say, nobody can tell what's going on in his head. Could there be bigger plan at play? Russian army leaving Kherson is a defeat, or is it a strategic movement by powerful and smart General Sergei Surovikin, who led the Syria war and proved himself in the past? Russia confirmed that it pulled out of Kherson in Ukraine. Certainly, that doesn't indicate a Russian defeat as shown by the media, but doesn't it open a path to Crimea as for Ukraine, as it would become easier for Ukraine to launch an offensive like the one in which they blew up a section of the Crimean bridge? These are the questions. So we do know that the Russians are withdrawing are in the process of withdrawing from Kherson, or have perhaps withdrawn entirely. We're still not quite sure. Let's go to the map and see where is Kherson. Yes. Just give me a second. I'm going to put the map on the screen and lead you all to the region of interest right now, the region that we are discussing, Kherson. Map. Here we are. Map is here. So we know where India is. We go westwards, west. Temporary nation Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and north of Turkey we have the Black Sea, and north of the Black Sea we have Ukraine, Novorossiya, Ukraine, whatever you want to call it. Now, where is Kherson? Kherson is in the south of Ukraine. This here is the port city, not the port city, but it's quite close to the Black Sea. It's the city of Kherson. It sits on the right bank or the west bank of the great river Dnieper. The Dnieper River is I think the fourth largest European river, and it's this river on which the city of Kiev is also founded. So Kherson is also the name of an oblast or province, which is one of the 4 provinces that Russia recently annexed after its referendums, and people have and they annexed these. The Russians annexed these 4 provinces, which means that they became part of Russia. They call it reunification. Others would call it annexation. Depends on your perspective. But it's now officially, from the Russian perspective, become part of Russian territory. It's been reunified with Russia, which means it comes under the Russian nuclear umbrella. And I had speculated that maybe that could cause problems. If somebody makes a move on Russian territory, it may be a red line that the Russians do not want anybody to cross, and that could lead to nuclear conflict. Well, clearly not the case. The Russians are withdrawing from the northern and western part of the Dnieper River. They're withdrawing from that part of Kherson province. What does it mean? Let's look at a different image to make things a little clearer. Let's take a look at a different image of the same region. It's a little small. Let me embiggen it a little. Nah, I think this is fine. Okay, so now you can see where Kherson is. You can see the western region west of the river that we're talking about. That's where the Russians are withdrawing from, or have withdrawn from. What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it indicate? Does it indicate that Russia is losing? Is this a disastrous setback and the beginning of the end for Russia? Does it mean the tide has turned? Is that what's happening? Does it mean that Mr. Putin has lost face? Is this indicative of a loss of prestige and loss of reputation for Mr. Putin? Does it mean that there are going to be knives out in Russia for Mr. Putin because leaders cannot fail? Leaders are not allowed to fail in Russia. Or how should India interpret this? How should Russia interpret this? How should the world interpret it? These are the questions. These are the questions that we are dealing with. These are the questions that we are grappling with, right? So there are a number of possibilities. So we don't know what's happening because we are not privy to the classified information and the thought process that's going on behind the scenes in the Russian top leadership in the armed forces. First of all, we have to understand these decisions. See, we have to understand that Mr. Putin is not a military commander. So he oversees military activities, but he doesn't decide exactly what happens. He has a grand plan for Russia, for the future of Russia. And then the military, its job is to carry out strategic maneuvers, tactical maneuvers, grand strategic campaigns in military theaters to make Mr. Putin's vision become a reality, to make it a reality. So when the Russian military does certain things, it is approved by Mr. Putin, but the tactics and strategies are typically decided by the top leadership of the military in consultation with Mr. Putin. So there are 3 or 4 possibilities. One possibility: why is Russia withdrawing from this part of Kherson and giving up the city of Kherson? Does this does this mean they are losing? So one possibility, and this is the least likely possibility. This first possibility is that this is a nasty trap that the Russians are setting for NATO. So what we are witnessing in Ukraine is a proxy war. It is between Russia and NATO. Ukraine is just the tool that NATO is using. Ukraine is being supplied with essentially unlimited quantities of arms, ammunition, and whatnot. And the Ukrainians are waging total war. They're throwing unlimited numbers of men into the meat grinder of the war, and so on. So, one possibility is that Russia is laying a nasty trap for NATO. They will withdraw, they will induce the enemy to come into this region, and then maybe they will do something nasty to them. Yeah. So this is a tried and tested tactic in warfare, the false retreat. So that is one possibility. I think it's the least likely possibility, but we should keep that in mind. From the this is the logic of strategy. So this is the least likely possibility. The second possibility, which is somewhat more likely, is that there are diplomatic negotiations going on. See, diplomacy happens behind the scenes. Diplomacy always happens in secret. It's only when an agreement is reached that diplomatic statements are made publicly, especially between adversaries and enemies. So maybe there are secret negotiations going on along through back channels between Russia and the West, between Russia and NATO, and maybe there is talk of a ceasefire. Maybe, yeah. Maybe there is talk of a ceasefire, and maybe that ceasefire could fructify, could be finalized during the G20 summit, or maybe after the G20 summit, soon after, perhaps, maybe. So in that case, if there is some such secret negotiations happening through diplomatic back channels, then maybe one of the prerequisites for a ceasefire is that Russia give up some token territory, maybe the Kherson city and north of the west of the Dnieper River, in exchange for NATO agreeing to ceasefire. That is a hypothetical possibility. I am not aware of what's really happening. I am just saying that this could be a possibility. This is more likely than Russia setting a trap for NATO. So the trap theory is the least likely possibility. Higher than that, there is more probability of this being some kind of prerequisite for an impending ceasefire. Yeah. So you do this, and then we will finalize the ceasefire. That could be the deal, possibly. All right. Here we go once again. Do I? One second. Let me fix this. It's. Okay. I think we are. Yeah, we're back. So the second possibility is that there could be an impending ceasefire, and this is a prerequisite for that. The third possibility is that this is indeed a setback for Russia. Yeah, I think it's working fine now. Yeah. So the third possibility is that this is indeed a setback for Russia. Their military has been forced to withdraw from this place, and maybe they want to regroup in the southern part of the river and stay there for the winter and play the long game. So the long game could last 1 year, 2 years. The conflict could drag on for a long time. So these are the three possibilities that I can think of. In case the Russians have been driven back because of superior military activities from Ukraine and NATO, in that case, let's go back to the image to see the image. Yes, let's take a look at the image. So in case the Russians have actually been militarily driven back by force, and they have been forcibly evicted from west of the river, in that case, what we will witness most likely is that the Ukrainian forces or NATO forces are going to try and cross the river themselves and try to make a move on Crimea itself. And the province of Crimea is, I believe, already in range of Ukraine's long range artillery. So we could witness artillery bombardment of the Crimea region, and we could possibly witness the NATO forces trying to cross the river and try to liberate the whole of the Kherson province. So, in case this is a military setback for Russia, then we will see this happening very soon. So, if this happens, then we know that the Russians have actually lost this part through military force. If this is a secret negotiation, secret agreement, then we will soon possibly see a ceasefire. So that will validate the second theory, that this is a prerequisite for a ceasefire. And if there is a disaster for Ukraine in the next coming days in Kherson, then it could validate the theory that this was a nasty trap set by the Russians. So these are the three possibilities. This is what I discussed yesterday. We still don't have more clarity on the situation. I will keep monitoring the situation because it is of importance and of interest to all of us. Yes, so I'm going to keep monitoring this, but this is where we are. So I hope this makes things a little clearer for everybody. This is where we are right now. Next question. Okay, bye bye says, will BRICS be the next UN? And Bobby says, this was always about the new world order, the NWO, and the challenge to the old order. BIS, Bretton Woods, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, central banks, reserve currency, etc. All these systems created by the West 70 years ago. One is Bitcoin, the other is BRICS, and there might be more out there. What do you think? BRICS is definitely a challenge to the existing whims-based world order, the rules-based world order, the imperial system that has been constructed by the West, which essentially means the regime that is run out of Washington D.C. and the Pentagon. Yes, this was all created in 1945 with the Bretton Woods Agreement, which made the US dollar the world's reserve currency. Everybody agreed to this, and that's been the backbone of the financial system ever since. So BRICS. So this is what we called the old order. Yeah, the US rules-based world order, or whatever you want to call it, right? BRICS is definitely a challenge to this. So BRICS could represent, like Bobby says, the new world order, or an aspirational new world order, a bifurcation of the system, a new system which will exist initially in parallel, which will attempt to exist in parallel to the US imperial system. Yes. Yeah, so it is definitely that, and it's a dangerous thing to do, because if you try to challenge the giant, the mighty superpower, there's going to be retaliation. There's going to be massive retaliation. So the BRICS nations are going to have to tread very carefully. Lots of nations want to join BRICS. The Saudis want to join BRICS. That is a very, very audacious and very dangerous move by Mohammed bin Salman, because his nation was essentially created by the British to further British geopolitical and imperial ambitions. Yes, and then it was after the British ceded the crown to the Americans, the Saudis became essentially a US client state, and the House of Saud owes its existence and continued reign, rule, prosperity, whatever, to the West. So, signaling its intention to join BRICS is a very dangerous thing to do from Mohammed bin Salman's perspective, but he has done that. Well, kudos to him, and I wish him well. We know history. We know what happens to clients of the US who try to break free of the US. We have seen various such examples in various parts of the world. One such example, which is not very old, is that of Saddam Hussein al-Tikriti. We know what happened to him. So Mr. Mohammed bin Salman needs to be very, very careful. Yeah. So all of this is definitely an attempt to set up a parallel system, a more fair system, a system that is more equitable, perhaps, and it will offer an alternative to countries that want to break free of the imperial system. So this is definitely that. Bitcoin is an attempt to do that as well, to break free of the hegemony of the centralized banks which control the money. So your money essentially is owned by them. That's how it is. Yeah. So if you have Bitcoin, it's entirely decentralized, it's permissionless, and it offers you actual freedom. Not Ethereum, not other cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin does. But now we are seeing that crypto is crashing. It may be being made to crash, and we are seeing these tussles being, the initial jousting happening right now. In the coming years, this will most likely intensify. So yes, the BRICS is the new world order. It's an attempt to create a new world order or a parallel world order, a bifurcation of the global system. In which everything will become bifurcated: the financial system, the supply chains, and so much more. There's so much more: energy, materials, agriculture, transportation infrastructure. Uh, Manufacturing, like I said, supply chains, and so many other things could become bifurcated if BRICS is able to succeed. So many nations seem to find it attractive. Algeria wants to join BRICS. Algeria is one of the major gas suppliers of the world. Indonesia may apply to join BRICS next week during the G20 summit. Turkey seems to have expressed its desire to perhaps explore being a part of BRICS. Argentina and many other nations. Yeah. So it's an interesting time. So this is all definitely an attempt to create a parallel system, a parallel new world order, and let's see how it goes. Let us see how it goes. Right. Once again, we are buffering. Why does this happen? And it is so annoying. Man, let me permanent solution to this, but I think it's getting better. Yes, it's better. Okay, the next question is also about BRICS. It's from India's perspective. Gautam Anand. India is in groups like the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, etc. And at the same time, we are also part of groupings such as the Quad. This balancing act foreign policy of India while also focusing on our interests is feasible and giving good results as of now. Do you think it is practical in the long run? As India's stature rises geopolitically, till what time can we manage to be a part of both the opposite camps of global geopolitics? This is a good question. So India is indeed a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is a grouping that's essentially led by the Chinese and also the Russians. So India, China, Russia are part of the SCO, other nations as well. BRICS is also the core group is India, Russia, China, plus South Africa, plus Brazil, and many other nations want to join. So India is part of this alternative grouping, which is an alternative to the West, to the Western hegemony. But India is also part of the Quad. So why is India doing this? It's doing it to safeguard its own national interest, because China is a major threat to India. China has been a major threat to India since the 1950s, when it forcibly occupied and annexed Tibet. As long as India and China share a common border, whether it's demarcated or not, India and China are going to be adversaries and rivals, especially when the border is undemarcated, and especially when China has become so massively powerful economically. you know uh, 5 times the size of India's economy right now. That's what the GDP is like, approximately 5 times the size. And obviously, their military will also be massive. They have a lot of other issues geopolitically. Their military is not entirely concentrated on the India-Tibet border. It's spread out. But yes, China is a major concern. It's India's number one threat, and because of that, India has opted to be a part of the Quad grouping, which is essentially India and the US and a couple of US satellites, which is Australia and Japan. Yes. So, yes, and India also has excellent, not excellent, but good relations with the US. Um, India is giving what we would call issue-based cooperation to the US. We are cooperating fully from the economic development perspective and technology and all that, but we are giving issue-based cooperation when it comes to strategic affairs and geopolitics. So that's the kind of relationship India and the US have nowadays. We are seeing that the US is once again supporting Pakistan. That is a direct threat to India. Yeah, you support India's number two adversary militarily. You're essentially investing in India's future, in bleeding India in the future. So that's the kind of relationship we have with the US. Now, you cannot, and obviously we know that India has been purchasing arms systems like the S-400 system, like submarines, etc., from the Russians, from Russia, various aircraft, many other things. We may even be on the verge of purchasing heavy strategic bombers from Russia. That's what one hears. Yeah, that's what the grapevine tells us. So India is doing all this. The Americans are obviously not pleased about this, but they gave India the CATSA waiver when it comes to the S-400 system. If India goes ahead and purchases the Russian strategic heavy bomber, the White Swan bomber, that could be a whole different thing. So India is doing this very delicate balancing act vis-a-vis the US and the East. The East is India, China, Russia, essentially. Yeah, this is impractical in the long run. In the long run, India will have to choose a camp. Will it be on the side of Russia and China? China is an adversary. BRICS is essentially unviable in the long term as long as India and China have this adversarial relationship. The only way India and China will not have an adversarial relationship for some time is if the border is demarcated. The India Tibet border is demarcated. Until that happens, it's unviable. Yes, FBI seems to have joined the chat. Somebody is saying, damn this. So we are buffering once again. Let me try and overcome that. Buffering. It's not better yet. Okay. Yes, people are giving me technical advice to set the bit rate correctly. CIA in chat. I think it's getting better. It's getting better. It's getting better. It's better now. So, like I was saying, BRICS is not a viable coalition in the long run if India and China remain adversaries. And there is, as as far as we see right now, there is no major move or steps being taken for India and China to resolve the border issue. So, in that case, it would be kind of unwise for India to throw its lot with BRICS, especially when China is the major economy in BRICS. That's dangerous. But once again, when it comes to the US and the West, they are now favoring Pakistan over India. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for India to throw its lot in with the US as well. So that is the conundrum, the dilemma that India is facing right now. I would say that India needs to put its head down and work on the economy. India has to anyhow ensure that there are the next 10-20 years are years of peace. There is no major conflict, no major war. Yeah, do the balancing act anyhow and ensure that you reach at least $10 trillion of GDP, annual GDP. Once you do that, India will become a whole different beast, and it will be difficult for even a nation like China to think about needling India or trying to play any mischief with India. So yeah, it's a conundrum for India. BRICS is, I mean, we would like to see a parallel world order, a new world order, a different set of rules as compared to the old, the legacy world order, the imperial world order of the US, the so-called rules-based uh, system, the UN system, and all that. We would like to see a new thing come up, but as long as India and China have this bad relationship, it's not going to be long-term viable in the long term. So yeah, that's where we are, and right now there are no right answers. So India has to essentially not rely on anybody. Nobody's gonna come and save India if something goes wrong. India is essentially on its own. All nations are on their own. Some nations have their groupings, like the US has a bunch of like 50, 60 vassal states that it can order to do whatever it wants. The Chinese have Pakistan. They had Pakistan. Pakistan is now in the US camp. So the Chinese have South Korea, and they were trying to bribe various nations, but nobody trusts China anymore. China and Russia have this transactional relationship of which is kind of a cooperative relationship for now, but Russia does not trust China, and neither does China trust Russia. So BRICS is India and Russia have a reasonable amount of trust. So as long as China is in BRICS, it's a problem, and China refuses to behave. China itself has imperial ambitions of its own. So yeah, that is the problem which we are in right now from India's perspective, and time will tell how it goes. The only thing for India is to rise. India has to anyhow ensure that it rises economically and stays peaceful for the next 10 years at least. Yeah, one could deal with Pakistan in a variety of ways, but there should be no war with China or any other major nations for minimum the next 10 years. Then India will be in a good position to set its own rules. So that's the situation. Okay, Samarth says, in response to Israel's plan to open two agricultural centers of excellence in Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan-backed terror group has warned of attacks targeting Israeli assets in the Union territory. Despite India-US deteriorating ties, India-Israel defense cooperation to increase is increasing, considering a rise in terror threats. Notably, there is a change in the Israeli leadership again. Yes, there is a change in the Israeli leadership. Mr. Netanyahu and his coalition have won the elections, and Mr. Netanyahu has been given about, I don't know, 30 days or so to form a government. So that's what we are witnessing in Israel. The Israelis have the same kind of Westminster inspired parliamentary system that we have in India, which is an offshoot, which is a copy essentially in a way of the British parliamentary system, which inherently is an unstable democratic system. Leadership can change anytime and all that. So that's what Israel is dealing with. Now, yes, so Mr. Netanyahu seems to be back in the saddle. He seems to be back in control, possibly, of Israel, of the leadership. And yeah, we have India-Israel cooperation. Israel is planning to open two centers of excellence, agricultural, in Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, and the Pakistanis are making threats and all that. Yeah. So the question is, will India-Israel ties keep on improving and remain strong? And India-Israel defense cooperation, other things as well. Will this remain strong despite deteriorating India-US ties? And the implicit assumption or implicit question in this is that Israel's foreign policy is a reflection or extension of US foreign policy, which it is to a large extent through no fault of Israel's. Israel is a small nation. It was recreated. Uh, when was it? 1948 or thereabouts? Yeah, in the 1940s, uh, and it's been under siege essentially from its neighbors ever since. So the Israelis, they have a significant diaspora in the US. I think the number of Jews in the US is 7 or 8 million. There's a lot of support to Israel from there, and Israel. The entire situation in the Middle East. Let's take a look at the map of the Middle East. Just for clarity, let's take a look at the map of the Middle East and see where Israel is. Right. So this is the Middle East, and this here is Israel on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. As you can see, it has a lot of adversaries around it: Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, and not far away you have Turkey, and so on. So all the Arab nations, and Turkey is not an Arab nation, obviously, but yeah. So Israel has always been under siege ever since it was recreated, reformed. Yeah. So Israel, the entire situation in the Middle East, the straight line nations, artificial nations, all that, it has been designed or created by the West in such a way that the entire region stays essentially permanently in turmoil, in conflict. The Middle East has been in crisis for decades, essentially ever since the end of the Second World War, more or less. One conflict, one problem after the other, and it's been designed to be that way. Now, Israel, to a large extent, its foreign policy is indeed an extension of US foreign policy. To a large extent, that is true. But the Israelis do not see themselves as a vassal state of the US. The Israelis Israel as a nation sees itself in a way like India sees itself, as a civilizational state. Israel is way older than the United States. Israel is, I would say, slightly more than 3,000 years old. If you look at the oldest records of the Jewish people, I think it's found in an inscription in Egypt, in one of the pharaonic inscriptions in Egypt that dates back to slightly more than 3,000 years. So the Jewish people have been around for a long time, at least 3,000 years, and they lived in this region, which is currently, which is now called Israel. Yeah, there's a whole history behind it. But then the Romans destroyed Israel, they destroyed Judea, they forced lots of Jewish people out of Israel. That became the wandering Jewish diaspora, which settled down in parts of Europe. And then there was the Islamic expansion into this region, the Ottoman expansion. Um, there was Saladin and so many people, because of which the Jewish people were forced to essentially uh, leave this region. So for the longest time, there was no Israel. And then the nation was recreated in the first half of the 20th century. So Israel has a long history. The Jewish people are very proud of that, and because of that, they have their own vision of what the future should be like, and that is not the same. That's not entirely the same as what the US would like them to be. Whenever the Democrats are in power, there's a lot of conflict between Israel and the US. The relationship between Barack Obama and Bibi Netanyahu was very strained. It was very cold, and you know, it was not a good relationship. So whenever the Democrats in power, there are problems within between in the Israel-US relationship. So the Israelis, they do conform to US diktats in a variety of ways from the foreign policy perspective, but they also have to some extent an independent foreign policy. And India and Israel, the national interests of these two nations, they converge to a significant extent, and that's why the Israelis, they would like that nation to exist for the longest time. And for that to happen, they need strong allies and cooperation. They need cooperation from nations like India. It would be good for both nations that way, so so despite, I would say that despite the deteriorating India-US relationship, I think the India-Israel relationship will remain strong, will remain positive, and is going to remain a good cooperative relationship. That's what I see, unless the US decides to go ahead and totally arm twist Israel, in which case the Israelis may have to capitulate. But as long as the Americans don't try to arm twist the Israelis, as long as that doesn't happen, the India-Israel relationship will most likely remain strong, uh, and cooperative. So that's what I believe will happen. But obviously, time will tell. If the India-US relationship becomes so bad that the Americans force Israel to stop cooperating with India, then things may change. But unless that happens, which seems to be somewhat unlikely right now, uh, things will remain good between India and Israel, and that's what I hope. Okay, Ayush says heartland is occupied by Russia. Then why is it not a superpower? Okay, so this is about the Mackinder's heartland theory, which is something which I spoke about, I think, during the last episode of the Indian Interest. So let's take a look at the map and understand what this is. So, according to the British academic geostrategist, whatever you want to call him, Mackinder, according to him, uh, the world island is made up of essentially Eurasia, yes, Eurasia, and the heartland is the region from the Volga to essentially the Yangtze River, which means it is the region that has traditionally been part of the Russian Empire, which was then later the USSR, and which is now mostly Russia. Yes, so this was a theory put forth by Halford Mackinder, who wrote it in an article, I think, in the very early 20th century. So we have the world island, and then you have the interlinked continents of, which is the interlinked continents of Europe and Asia. Uh, you have Africa, and then you have the offshore islands like the British islands, the islands of Japan, and all that. And the outlying islands are North America, South America, and Oceania, which is Australia, and all that. So, according to Mackinder, the pivot area, the most important area in the world, is the heartland, which is from the Volga to the Yangtze rivers, yes, the Himalayas to the Arctic. That part of Eurasia, it is what is currently Russia, more or less. And this region contains about 50% of the world's resources, raw materials, minerals, petroleum products, oil, gas, metals, agriculture, everything. You need to indefinitely sustain a nation and a large military. And this heartland is protected by, it is protected from sea power by the ice in the north, this region, and by mountains and deserts in the south. So it is very well protected. And Mackinder said that whoever rules Eastern Europe commands the heartland, and whoever commands the heartland commands the world island, and whoever rules the world island commands the world. So the key to the heartland is Eastern Europe, and the key to Eastern Europe is Ukraine, and that is the source of the conflict that we are witnessing. NATO was trying to expand into Ukraine. Yes. So this is the heartland rimland theory, and there's a rimland theory as well. So China and India are rimland powers, according to this. Yeah. So China is a rimland or rim world powers. Um, so the question is, the heartland is occupied by Russia, so why is it not a superpower? Well, go back 20, 30 years, the USSR was a superpower. Go back a century before that, the Russian Empire was a superpower. It was a major power for the longest time, for a very long time in Europe, until the ascendancy of the British Empire. So it is not enough to simply control the heartland. It is not enough. See, in the heartland, you have access to all the resources. You have access to energy like oil and petroleum products and gas. You have energy. You have access to all kinds of materials. You have lots of great fertile agricultural land, and you have this immense territory. So this is what the heartland gives you, but that's not enough to become a superpower. You need transportation. You need to construct roads, railways. You need all the entire transportation infrastructure. You need the finance network. You need manufacturing. You need supply chains. You need to invest in engineering and technology, in the research and development. You need to invest in world class education system, fundamental scientific research. You need to have a culture of innovation. You need to have a culture of meritocracy. You need the demography needs to be taken care of. There has to be social cohesion. There needs to be pride in the nation and its culture. There has to be a strong national vision. You need a very powerful leadership, strong leadership. You need political stability. And to safeguard all of this, you need a powerful military. That's what makes a superpower. So the United States, for the longest time, it was inhabited by the Native Americans. They did not create a superpower, but the Europeans, the Anglo-Saxons, they conquered the North American continent. They got rid of the natives more or less, and they created a superpower. So it's not enough to have the territory. You have to build all this on top of the territory. So when this USSR broke up in the 1990s, all that I spoke about was absent. The transportation infrastructure was there, but the finance, the economy became very bad, right? The political leadership was terrible. Boris Yeltsin, the drunkard. Yeah, there was no political stability. The leadership was weak. Yeah, the economy became. It crumbled. When your economy is not strong, you can't have a powerful military. You can't have a great education system. You can't have research and development in science and technology and engineering, in innovation, all those things. So that's what went wrong, and now the Russians are trying to recreate that. So it is not enough to occupy the heartland. You have to build on top of it. You have to create this wonderful top of the line system. Only then will you have the ability to potentially transform yourself into a superpower. I hope that answers the question, Ayush. Suhas says, when I was searching about the heartland theory, I also came across the rimland theory. Won't having control over a majority of the rimland from Iran to parts of Thailand be India's best interest, since we dream of being a superpower? Once again, let's take a look at the map. So the rimland is this entire region, for the region of Japan. No, Japan is the outlying islands, one of the outlying islands, but China, Southeast Asia, and India, this is all the rimland. Yes. So the rimland, according to Mackinder, is vulnerable to the heartland power and the ocean power, which is US and NATO. So it's because it's exposed to both these major powers. Anyhow, that's the theory. Now, the rimland, I mean, if you look at China versus India, China is encircled by the three island chains. One island chain is the Japanese islands and Taiwan. Then you have the Philippines and the, with other islands, and then you have the Marianas and the third island chain. There are three island chains that essentially shackle China and prevent it from becoming a major naval power. And these island chains are controlled by the US. When it comes to India, there is no such constraint, right? So India is a rimland power. India has access. India occupies this god gifted commanding position over the entire Indian Ocean region. India has always been a maritime power for the past 10,000 years. Yes. So I think India should really focus on naval power and on naval aerial power as well. India has these unsinkable aircraft carriers, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and the Lakshadweep Islands. We potentially also in the future could have a very excellent mutually beneficial relationship with Sri Lanka as well in the future. We have the Maldives as well, with which we could have the same kind of relationship. So India is potentially a great rimland power if it can create the economy that can sustain a major military that can sustain its interests, its strategic interests in this area. We don't need to occupy Iran and parts of Thailand, like you're mentioning. I mean, India has always been a major power without doing that. India in the past did indeed occupy the entirety of Southeast Asia up to the Philippines once, as far as we know in its history, which was about 1,000 years ago under the rule of the great Chola Empire, the Rajraj and Rajendra Chola. But you don't have to conquer and occupy places like Iran, nations like Iran and Thailand. All you need to do is to have a good relationship with them, a good, mutually respectful, mutually beneficial relationship. In that case, we can have access to those parts of the rimland as well. So you don't need to have control over it, but you need to have access to it because of a good relationship with those nations. So yes, you are right. See, does India dream of being a superpower? Lots of people, I mean, in the comments I see it almost every day. When is India becoming a superpower? So yes, Indians are now aspiring. The Indian population, especially the youngsters, are now aspiring to see the aspiration is to see India becoming a superpower soon, maybe in the next 20 years, maybe definitely within our lifetimes. Yes. Does the Indian leadership want to see India being a superpower? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. There are no pronouncements as such from the leadership, and it is always wise uh, not to talk about your long-term ambitions and aspirations and hopes. Uh, but India's historical position has been of the world's largest economy for the past 10,000 years, essentially. And if you look at the study of the past 2,000 years, from the what's his name, Angus Madison, right? So he published his very influential study of the world's economy in the past 2,000 years. And India, until the 1700s, was the world's largest economy. It accounted for at least a third of the entire world's GDP, right? And in the past, it would have been even more than that. So India historically has been always the number one economic power, and at times it's been the world's major military power as well, from various in various times. For instance, during the Kushan Empire, later during the Gupta Empire, the Karkota Empire, the Chola Empire, and so on and so forth. So there have been times when India, and obviously the Mauryan Empire as well. So India is a potential superpower. India is definitely already, to some extent, a great power, one of the three or four great powers in the world, maybe the three great powers. And in the future, it could be a superpower if India plays its cards right. And I would say that the key to becoming a superpower in the next 20 to 50 years is to focus on the maritime element, on the sea, on the rim. India is a rimland power. India commands the entire Indian Ocean. So India should leverage that God-gifted position that it has. In that, if it does, then so India needs to invest in a powerful navy. India needs to develop the unsinkable aircraft carriers, which is the Andaman Nicobar Islands and the Lakshadweep Islands. And India should also invest in a powerful coast guard, in a powerful and extensive merchant navy, which can serve a dual purpose. That's what the Chinese are doing. So learn from our adversaries. So yeah, that's the answer. Okay, this is a question I've not taken for a while, but I see it every single day. People ask me this question every day. Saurabh, Nikhil, and Swarup Vaidya, our defense minister said that we will soon acquire the regions of Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Is there any chance of China involving in the support of Pakistan militarily? The second question is, Mr. Rajnath Singh indirectly spoke about taking back POK. Including this in mind, if we see India is building an airbase near the Pakistan border, there's an accidental fire of the BrahMos missile into Pakistani territory, and there are air force exercises currently happening near the Pakistan border. Is the Pak-India war about to happen in the next 10 years for POK? And will we really take back POK soon? Why did the army announce that? Are they really going to attack? Shouldn't they be keeping it a secret? Whatever plans you have, you should always keep them a secret. And whatever you talk about should not give away your real plans. So what did Mr. Rajnath Singh, our defense minister, say? He said that POK will come. Have some patience, it will come soon enough. That's what he said. He did not give a timeline. He did not announce that next week we are launching a liberation exercise or liberation maneuver of POK. No such thing has been announced. He said, have patience, POK will return to India soon enough. That's what he said. It is a general statement. If you actually are planning to do that, you never ever announce it, which means there are no plans currently to make a move on POK. Please understand that. It's not going to happen next week, next month, or next year, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe sometimes you do a double bluff. In cricket, if you want to bowl a bouncer, you put a guy on the square leg boundary and make it look like to the batsman like you're going to bowl a yorker, and then you actually bowl a bouncer. So yeah, there could be a bluff, there could be a double bluff, there could be a triple bluff. We don't know. But I don't see India making a move to take back and reunify POK with India in the immediate future. But obviously, it is definitely on the cards in the medium to long term. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Nobody, no power, no force in the world can stop this from happening, from India reunifying POK with India and liberating the rest of the temporary Pakistani provinces from the tyranny of the Pakistani army. It's going to happen. Yeah. So yes, we are building air bases near the Pakistan border because we should. We do it because we can and because we should. So we are doing it. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. Yeah, there has been an accidental firing of the BrahMos missile, which inadvertently went into Pakistani airspace and crashed into Pakistani territory, which was an accident. It happens sometimes. A nuclear-capable supersonic cruise missile, and there are air force exercises which happen regularly. You go to any water area, you will see fighter planes buzzing around at supersonic speeds, sonic booms, dropping sonic booms everywhere. It doesn't mean that we're going to imminently retake POK. So yeah, this is just a general statement. Obviously, it creates a lot of excitement in various quarters of the Indian population, various parts of the Indian population. When it happens, it will be very exciting and it will be very fast. But it's not happening soon, as far as I can see. Will the Chinese get involved in supporting Pakistan militarily when India reacquires POK? It depends on a whole lot of factors. If we do it now, the Chinese will most likely want to get involved. They will most likely want to get involved. And so these are the calculations. These are the different parameters you need to look at before you make any move. When you launch a military operation, ideally you want to launch the military occupation when you are 100% certain of winning. And when you are certain that your casualties will be less. You don't want to take lots of casualties, and you want to win. Ideally, you want to win without fighting. Ideally, you want to see Pakistan give up POK voluntarily. Ideally, fighting without fighting, like Bruce Lee said. So that's the ideal situation. So as long as the China factor is there, as long as the US factor is there, India will not make a move on POK. India will make its move on POK when the situation is advantageous, when the time is right. And that time is not right now. Right now, the US will not want India to take back POK. Because if we take back POK, we have direct access to Afghanistan. Then we can have direct access to Central Asia through Afghanistan. That would be extremely advantageous for Russia as well. It would be great for Afghanistan as well. That would not be great for the long-term American objectives in the region, right? Uh, it would give Russia access to warm water ports in India, which would totally upend the world order in in a very short amount of time. So, if India tries to take back PUK right now, the Americans will try to prevent that through a variety of means. Even the Pakistan, even the Chinese will try to do that, which is why now is not the right time, in my opinion. Obviously, I could be wrong, and tomorrow we could see POK being liberated. In which case, I'll eat my words. But yeah, that's what I think right now. It's a little early for us to take back POK, but it will happen sooner rather than later. It will happen. Okay, Mazar Chachar says there was an assassination attempt on Mr. Imran Khan during his long march. Who do you think was behind this assassination attempt? And where do you see Pakistan in the next 10 years, keeping in view the current political and economic crisis? And Bye Bye says, what's your take on Imran Khan being shot at or shot? Was that a false flag, or was it like a real assassination attempt? Do you think he is the one going to prove the temporary nation future? Okay, who do I think was behind the assassination attempt? Was this a false flag operation, or was it a genuine assassination attempt? Um, it's hard to tell, but see, if you look at what happened to Benazir Bhutto, it was a very similar kind of situation. She was doing this public rally and she was shot, and she was shot in the head by somebody at almost nearly point blank range. Somebody just walked up to her and shot her in the head. I think there were multiple gunshots, and then there was a bomb blast as well to create confusion. So something similar seems to have happened in the case of Mr. Imran Khan. Right now, if if you are a professional assassin, you're not gonna miss from close range. And if you're standing on the ground and you're firing at somebody who's at a higher level than you, you're not going to end up shooting that person in the leg, which kind of makes it look fishy. That why was he only shot in the leg? I mean, the when a person when a person is shot in battle or in any other situation, the odds are that that person will be shot in the torso, the chest, or in the abdomen, because that is the largest part of the body. The arms and legs are very much smaller targets. So if you're shot in that, it's kind of fishy. It's like somebody wanted to shoot you there only so that you don't get you know killed. Typically, if you're shot in the arm or the leg, you'll survive that. You will lose blood and you may need an operation. You may need corrective surgery to your bone or whatever, in case it is clipped. But overall, it's not a fatal wound. So either this was a false flag operation to make it look like somebody wants to kill him and maybe to garner sympathy for him. That is one possible scenario. The other possibility is that the assassin was an amateur, and that person or persons genuinely goofed up, and Mr. Imran Khan got lucky. These are the two possibilities. I don't know who could be behind the assassination attempt. Obviously, he is the former prime minister. He was evicted, ousted, which cannot happen without the connivance and the approval of the Pakistani deep state, which is the ISI and the army, mainly the army and the ISI, and also the foreign the foreign ministry, or whatever, the bureaucracy, the permanent establishment. So Mr. Imran Khan was removed from power. This removal could only have been done with the approval of the Pakistani army, ISI, and deep state. And we know the shift that's happened in Pakistan. For the last decade or so, they were calling China their iron brother. But now you're seeing a resurgence of interest in Pakistan from the US. And the US has way deeper pockets and a much bigger stick than the Chinese do, which means that Pakistan is now a proper US vassal state all over again. So, most likely, the odds are that Mr. Imran Khan was removed from power at the behest of the US. It all happened after his visit to Russia on the same day that Mr. Putin launched the invasion of Ukraine, which was very bad optics. Yeah, and maybe that was all done on purpose to make it easier for the Pakistanis to remove Imran Khan or whatever. So in case it is in case the deep state, the army, the ISI views Mr. Imran Khan as a long-term threat to their ambitions and to their plans, then maybe they want to eliminate him. That's a possibility. And maybe it's being done at the behest of some foreign powers also, perhaps, who knows. So that is one possibility. The other possibility is that this was some local disgruntled element who wanted to kill Mr. Imran Khan. Maybe that person was an amateur, or maybe this was something done by from sources close to Mr. Imran Khan himself, perhaps, to perhaps garner sympathy for him among the Pakistani Awam, the Pakistani Janta, the population. These are three possibilities that I can think of. I don't know which one is correct. Um, some possibilities have a higher probability, but we're not quite sure, and most likely we won't know. But he has survived, and good for him. Good for him. So yeah, and the other question is, where do I see Pakistan in the next 10 years, keeping in view the current political and economic crisis? See, Pakistan was created to divide the people of the Indian subcontinent. It was created by the UK to further its geopolitical long-term ambitions, and that's what it was. And once the crown was passed on from the UK to the US has used Pakistan to further its geopolitical, its geostrategic objectives in the Indian subcontinent region and overall in Eurasia. One trouble spot is the Middle East, which is permanently in crisis. The other trouble spot they have created, the West, is the Indian subcontinent, which is divided artificially, and where all these tensions are periodically inflamed. So the India Pakistan thing has always been there since 1947, 1948, right? So as long as these powerful nations, essentially the US, earlier it was China, as long as the US sees Pakistan as a valuable asset, as long as that happens, Pakistan will continue to exist. If the US loses interest, then maybe the Chinese will take over. So essentially, Pakistan has been created by foreign powers to divide India, and it has been propped up ever since. The various military dictatorships, these dictatorships have been propped up and sustained by foreign powers. The moment foreign powers stop sustaining Pakistan, Pakistan will implode. The problem is that it's a nuclear armed state. We don't want to have a nuclear armed Somalia, chaos. That's the last thing we want, I think. Yeah, so that's the situation. So I think as long as the US props up the Pakistanis, Pakistan will survive, will keep on existing. The people will survive somehow, and the army and the ISI and all the top brass will keep getting richer. They will buy properties in London, in the US. They will send their children to study there, and they will have fat bank accounts over there. And when the time is right, they will leave the country. So as long as the foreign nations, foreign powers keep on propping up Pakistan, it will exist. Will this go on for the next 10 years? Perhaps. Odds are that Pakistan may not survive 10 years. Like I've said so many times, I have nothing against the people of Pakistan. I wish them well. I wish them prosperity. I wish their children and their descendants prosperity and safety. But Pakistan is a terrorist nation. And this nation needs to be dealt with appropriately, hopefully without any military force, without any violence, hopefully. But yeah, that's what it is. It's a terrorist nation. It's been the epicenter of global terrorism for the longest time, since the 1980s at least. So Pakistan needs to be dealt with. Maybe it may last 10 years, but its long-term survival is highly, highly improbable. Right? Swastika says, shouldn't Pakistani Punjab and Sindh also be a part of India as they were so before partition? If partition hadn't happened, those areas would have been part of India. But I say that those two regions should be independent, like Balochistan. Why do I say this? Shouldn't Pakistani Punjab and Sindh be part of India? Look, Pakistan is an integral part of India. It's always been part of India for the longest time, 10,000 plus years. In the future, it will again become part of India. But right now, it is not practical, even if Pakistan breaks up. Even if Pakistan breaks up, right now, it is not practical to reintegrate those parts like Sindh and Balochistan and Pakistan, Punjab, etc., with India right now. Why is that? because the population for the past 3, 4, 5, 6 generations has been totally radicalized, and they've been taught to hate India and Indian culture. They have been fed this venom from the time they are born. So if you look at 100 Pakistanis, I would say 90% of them would have this strong hatred and animosity, very strong animosity towards India. And it's not possible to reintegrate people with that mindset. So whenever it happens that Pakistan is balkanized and Sindh becomes independent, Punjab becomes independent, Balochistan becomes independent, Pashtunistan maybe go back to Afghanistan. Once this happens, once the evil shadow of the ISI and the Pakistan army is taken away from the poor, hapless, suffering people of Pakistan, then it will take another 3, 4 generations for that mindset to perhaps go away. Only then can we reintegrate those regions with uh, with India. So it will happen in the long run, but it is not advisable to do it immediately. So there should be a cooling off period, maybe 50 years or so, and then things may be better, you know. So that's why those regions need to be independent for some time at least. Obviously, Sindh, Punjab, Balochistan, all even Afghanistan, of course, was part of India. Let's talk about the region of Pakistan right now. Sindh is obviously an integral part of India. India is incomplete without the Sindhu River. The Sindhu River is one of the two great ancient rivers of India. One of the three, four, one of the 4 or 5 great ancient rivers of India, which were at the heart of Indian civilization. One is the Ganga, the other is the Yamuna. The other two are the Saraswati and the Sindhu. The Saraswati no longer is with us. She chose to leave. That's her choice. But the Sindhu, India is incomplete without the Sindhu River, the Indus River. Some parts of it do flow through India, in northern India, in Ladakh, etc. Very beautiful river. But yes, the whole of the river has to eventually be returned to the fold of India. It will happen, but not yet. It is not practical if Pakistan breaks up to immediately reunify those regions or those territories with India. It will take time. We have to be practical. Okay, what is this from? Hind Se Taviputra. Okay. The question is, I'd like to hear your comments on the Great Nicobar Development Project in terms of security, economy, environmental impact on indigenous tribes. Kopura crop. Kopura crop. That's in Thai. So, what is this Great Nicobar Development Project? Let's take a. I mean, I hope you all know where the Nicobar Islands are. Where the Great Nicobar Island is, you have the Andaman and Nicobar Islands over here, the archipelago, and the Great Nicobar Island, I believe, is this one. This is Little Andaman. Ah, okay, it's here. This is the Great Nicobar Island. So the northern islands are the Andaman Islands, and the southern islands are the Nicobar Islands. And this one here is the Great Nicobar Island, which is the southernmost part of India. It's about 200 or so kilometers away from Indonesia, which means Indonesia is our neighboring country, in case you don't know. So there is going to be this massive, not massive, but a significant development project on this island. Now, let's take a look at a news article that tells us a little bit more about that. Let's remove this from the screen and let's put up that news article. Where is it? Okay, this is it. Let me put it up on the screen and then let's discuss what's happening there. It's a very important project. So, environmental path cleared for Great Nicobar mega project. This news article is from the 10th of October, which is about a month or so ago. So it's a major infrastructure and tourism project, which has received the green signal from the Union Environment Ministry's committee or whatever. Yeah. There's going to be ecotourism. There's going to be tourism, coastal tourism, green and recreational, defense, ICTT, airport, all those things. So this shows you where it's going to be, right? This is there are a couple of national parks there, all named after foreigners for some reason. And no, I would not like to subscribe. Okay, here it is. So the red region or the orange region over here on the map is where the project is going to be. That's the project area. So we're gonna have a port, obviously. There's going to be an airport which will have a dual, it's going to be a dual use airport, which is going to have a military use and civilian use as well. There are many airports in India which are dual use airports, many of them. For instance, I believe the airport, there is an airport in Assam, the Silchar airport, which is a military airport, and it's also used for civilian aircraft, civilian flights. Then the Leh airport in Ladakh, if you land there, you will see military planes all over the place. So there are many dual use airports in India. So this airport is also going to be a dual use airport. There's going to be a major port that will be built over here, a container terminal, and various other things. So why is this significant? So like I've said in this live stream itself, and I've said many times before, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and the Lakshadweep Islands also need to be developed. These are unsinkable aircraft carriers. We need to develop infrastructure there. We need to develop military infrastructure there. We need to develop air force and naval infrastructure there. We can use them for as major transshipment ports. Which could kind of bypass the Colombo port, which is the only major transshipment port in the Indian subcontinent and all that. So it's great for the Indian economy. It's great for Indian security. It will ensure that India has a major security military presence in this region. We will be able to. We could potentially. Have a bunch of Sukhoi or other aircraft over there, maybe even strategic bombers. You could have Indian Navy destroyers and submarines based over there, potentially, possibly. I am speculating. I don't have any information. I'm just telling you. Yeah, ideally we want to do that. We want to have pods of area denial missiles, A2AD bubbles around this region, so that if the Chinese try to uh, enter the region with malified intentions, we could deal with them appropriately. So all this needs to happen. So clearly this is a step in that direction. It's a very welcome step. It's a very good step. I commend the government of India for taking this step. There will be all kinds of opposition. So let's take a look. I showed you this article. Let me show you a whole different article. So this article was from a publication called, what is it called, Monga Bay or whatever. Let me show you a different article about the same project. Here's what, there's a different perspective. Then this is from the Hindu, frontline, thehindu.com. Massive infrastructure project threatens the Great Nicobar Island. So in their opinion, this is a great threat to the Nicobar Islands biodiversity. It's stripping the protected status of some parts of the island. And yeah, there are these monkeys, macaques, and various other animals over there. The tree shrew, which could be threatened, turtles, olive ridley turtle hatchling and all that, anthropogenic threats to the local people, and so on. So that's what this article is trying to tell us. It's an alarmist article. It's telling us this is a terrible project. So what's the truth? Any development project will have a certain environmental impact. Yes, that is true, but it is necessary for India's national security. And the government, I believe, is committed to reforest another part of the island, or any other, or some other place, in to make up for the lost forest cover. So it is unfortunate, but it has to happen. Yes, it will impact some of the local tribes people who have been living for a very long time on the island, but it is necessary. It is necessary for the long term national security, and for the continued survival, essentially, of India, and for India's long term ambitions. Yeah, to become a major world power once again. It has to happen. So it's going to be great for the national security of India, from the air force perspective, from the navy perspective, from the area denial and missile launching perspective. It gives you, if you have a bunch of missiles there, we have a whole lot of missiles. We have a whole bouquet of missiles of various characteristics. We have the supersonic BrahMos missile, which will come in an extended range as well. We have cruise missiles like the Nirbhay, which is under development. We have various ballistic missiles. You launch things from there, they're going to have a whole different range. And so it's great for the security of the nation. It's going to be great for the economy, because it's going to be a transshipment hub. So that will bring in lots of revenue for India. There will be an environmental impact, which is inevitable. It will force some of the local indigenous tribes people to have to move to a different region. I'm sure the government will do the right thing for them, and give them a different place to live in on the same island. The island is quite large, so I am sure all of this will be taken care of by the government. But overall, from the perspective of the Indian national interest, it's a very good development, and I'm really happy to see this. So that's what I have to say about this. Okay, so this this is from Twitter. So I had said on Twitter, in response to somebody else's tweet, that Australia is not a US ally. Australia is US property. So in response to my tweet, this gentleman called Shardul Sharma says that Australia is also one of the richest places on earth, and the Australians don't have any issues being US property. So chill, bro, chill. So this Sharma sounds like an Indian person. Maybe he is an Australian citizen. I'm not sure, but he has decided to speak on behalf of the Australian people, and he's saying that it's okay to be US property as long as you're rich. So chill. Now here's a different comment from an actual Australian person. He says that it's from Paul Rankin. He says that Australia has a permanent rotation of about 15,000 US troops in case we Australians decide we don't like their corporations. What is this Australian gentleman saying? He is saying that Australia is under permanent US military occupation. And if you look at it deeper, Australia is essentially US property. So let's take a look at some evidence of that. Yeah. So this is an article from an Australian news site. Yes. It says US military bases in Australia protecting us or putting us at risk. The US has a network of secretive military bases across Australia, and something it could plunge Australia into a war. The US is strengthening a network of secretive military bases across Australia, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And it's got some images of that. Let's take a look at a different article. Put that on the screen. The Asia Pacific Journal, the US military presence in Australia is asymmetric alliance cooperation and its alternatives. It says that as in Japan and Korea, this involves Australia governments identifying Australian national interests with those of the US. The integration of the Australian military forces organizationally and technologically with US forces, and a rapid and extensive expansion of an American military presence in Australia itself. So once again, this is alluding to US military occupation of Australia. Let's take a look at how many military bases the US has in Australia. What does it show? So this is a Wikipedia article. A standard disclaimer: Wikipedia is not always reliable. We have to use it very carefully if we do use it. So Australia, Pine Gap, Naval Communication System, Harold E. Holt, Robertson Barracks, and so on and so forth. It has a whole bunch of bases that are listed over here, but there are many more bases that are not listed, as is evident from the other articles that we just saw. Let's take a look at one more article to drive home the point that we are trying to make. This is this article over here. It's once again from an Australian news site. US military plans for greater presence in Australia as it confronts China's power. And so plans for US military upgrades of Australian defense sites have been highlighted in a long-awaited Pentagon study. And so on, new rotational fighter and bomber aircraft deployments, and so on. So I think you get the point that I am trying to make, that Australia is under permanent US military occupation. Australia does not have an independent foreign policy, and Australia's economic and military policy is integrated with that of the US, and its foreign policy is also integrated with that of the US, which means that Australia is an extension of the US. And if you look deeper into it, Australia is essentially owned by the US, even though technically it's owned by the British Crown, which means it is a property of King Charles III, or whatever number he is, King Charles II. But De facto, if you look at it from the realistic perspective, Australia is owned by the US. So now this fine gentleman, my friend Shardul over here, says that it's okay if it's owned, if it's US property. It's one of the richest places on earth. So chill. So what this gentleman is saying is that it's okay to be owned by somebody else as long as you are prosperous, you're rich, and you have a good life. So look at it like this: it's entirely possible for your country to be occupied by a foreign nation, and yet for the people of your country to have prosperity. Look at Japan. Japan has been under permanent, hardcore US occupation since 1945. It doesn't have an independent foreign policy. Its economic policy is dictated by the US. Its internal policy, also to a large extent, is dictated by the US to a large extent. And yet, Japan is the world's most technologically advanced nation. Its people are very prosperous compared to nations like India, very rich, very high GDP per capita. They have complete financial freedom. They can choose to go and move anywhere in the world if they want. So, individually, each individual in Japan is free. Each Japanese citizen is free and rich and prosperous, and yet the nation is enslaved by a foreign power. It is perfectly possible for an enslaved nation to have free people. So, is that the right thing? Is that good? As long as I am free, as long as I am rich, and as long as I can do what I want, I am perfectly fine with my nation being enslaved by another. This is called slave mindedness. This is the slave mentality that people talk about. So, this is what we are witnessing here. It's unfortunate that so many Indians suffer from this slave mentality. So unfortunate. And that's why I keep saying, please raise your standards. We need higher standards in India. So, that's what I have to say about this. Yeah. Okay. Saurabh says, how did the Britishers mold the varna-jati system into the caste system? We know that caste comes from the root word casta, which is a Portuguese word. What's the difference between casta and the varna-jati system? And Rahul says, oh, what a bullshit you are speaking, Abhijit. If the caste system was invented by the British, then why do the Nepalese follow the system, even though they were never colonized by the British? And one of the reasons for the creation of Sikhism is the caste issues in Hinduism. Check your facts first, Abhijit. You're talking bullshit. This is a problem I face almost every day. And no matter how many facts I put forth, people are unwilling to see. Sikhism was not created in a response to some imagined caste system in Hinduism. Sikhi was a response to foreign imperialism and foreign occupation of India by the Turks. That was the purpose of the creation of Sikhi, or what we call Sikhism. It has nothing to do with so-called caste system. The Nepalese don't follow a caste system; they follow the varna-jati system. Now, let me once again put some facts in case some of you may understand it. I know that most of my audience is really intelligent, which is why they've watched the Ask Abhijit show. But in case there are some newcomers or some others as well, let me put some facts. Let's take a look at this. So, if I show you an article or a book written by an Indian, you will not believe it. This is part of the mental colonization. If I show you something, an article or a book written by an Indian, you will not believe it. So, I have to show you articles and books written by foreigners. That's the unfortunate mental colonization that we see in India. So, here's one: The Western Foundations of the Caste System. It's by Martin Farrick, Duncan Jalki, and two Indians, right? So this is a book I would recommend that you read, because it talks about the Western foundations of the caste system. Let me show you a review of this book, right? There's a book summary as well. I'll put it on the screen so that you can study it yourself. I would request you to do some reading of your own. Yes, this is a book summary. You can look it up online. You know what the title is: Western Foundations of the Caste System, and it's a 4-part review. This is the first part of that review. This is one article. Please study this. You need to do some reading of your own to understand things. You cannot simply blindly believe what you have been taught, which you have not really studied on your own. So this is something I would recommend that you read. Now let me give you some more references. There is another book. Once again, I'm giving you a foreign author because you will not trust Indian authors, because you have this inferiority complex, some of you. This book is called Castes of Mind, Colonialism, and the Making of Modern India. It's by Nicholas B. Dirks, who is a very prominent and very well respected American academic. Yes, it's called Castes of Mind, Colonialism, and the Making of Modern India. Let me show you some more. I would like you to read this. Read all of this that I'm telling you. Don't trust me. Don't fact check what I'm telling you. And how will you fact check? By looking at by reading all this, by studying all this. Here's a different article. It's by a person called Akbar Dosanjh, Caste as a Colonial Creation. The discussion around UK legislation on caste discrimination is too quick to forget how much it was Britain which invented the system in the first place, the so-called caste system. The words of the British superintendent of the 1921 census are still poignant today. We pigeonholed everybody by caste, and if we could not find a true caste for them, we labeled them with the name of the hereditary occupation. We deplore the caste system and its effect on social and economic problems, but we, the British, are largely responsible for the system we deplore. Do you see this? Let me show you some more. It's so sad that I have to keep on doing this every single time and people just don't understand. This is an article called The Indian Caste System in the British. I would like you to read this article, please. It says, I'm just showing you a small excerpt. Moreover, as will be seen later in this paper, it appears that the caste system extant in the late 19th and early 20th century has been altered as a result of British actions, so that it increasingly took on the characteristics that were ascribed to it by the British. You see that? Please study this article in its entirety. You want to understand things, you have to do some research, some work of your own. Here's one more. I'm gonna throw a whole bunch of data at you today because I'm tired of this nonsense. Do you trust the BBC? Yes, you trust the BBC. I'm sure it's not Indian, right? So it's from the UK, so you have to trust it. Viewpoint: how the British reshaped India's caste system. Yeah, and here's an excerpt. In a new book, The Truth About Us, whatever, I show how the social categories of religion and caste as they are perceived in modern day India were developed during the British colonial rule at a time when information was scarce and the colonizers' power over information was absolute. So once again, it tells you that the British created this so-called caste system, right? Okay, let me show you some more. Yeah, let's see the Greek perspective, because the British perspective is not enough, I'm sure, for you all. So this is the 300 BC book Indica by Megasthenes dispels caste theories of India. So what does it tell us, right? What's point number 5? The Indians, this is what Megasthenes, the Greek ambassador to India during the Mauryan times, this is what he said. This is what he wrote. The Indians generally were divided into 7 categories. The wise men, which is interpreted as Brahmins, then the farmers, the herdsmen, the artisans, the soldiers, the overlookers, and the government officials, including army and navy officers. There were 7 categories, not castes, 2,500 years ago. There was no caste system, right? There were 7 classes, not 4, 7 classes. That's what the Greeks found in India. Let me show you more. Come on, let's do this. Let's do it properly today. This is an inscription from Birchabalitika Tila, Agra, Sikri, about 1,000 years ago. Okay, there was no caste, there was only Gotra 1,000 years ago. Let's see what this inscription says. There is an image of the inscription and there are translations into Hindi and English. Om Siddham. The Shreshthis of Sanchamara and Bhallikya Gotras installed the image of Shri Shruti Devi Saraswati in the habitat of the Muni, so and so forth and so on and so forth. It does not mention any caste, any so-called caste. It only mentions Gotra, which means the lineage, the family line. Let's see some more. This is an article by Dr. David Frawley. He's an American. He's a Hindu, so you may not trust him, perhaps. Right? You need somebody who's not a Hindu. But let me show it to you anyway. Why Varna is not caste. This is by Dr. David Frawley. It's from about 6 years ago. Please read the article. I'm not going to read it out over here. So this is another reference that I'm offering you. Let's see some more. Let us see some more. Do you know that there were 4 divisions of society in China? What does it remind you of? 4 occupations, 4 categories of the people. Was an occupation classification used in ancient China by Confucian and legalist scholars. Yes? And you find that later in it's outside China, in Japan, which the so-called Japanese castes. These were not castes, but in English they call everything a caste. This is the myopic worldview of the West. They are saying that the Japanese also had castes. These were not castes, but they are calling the nomenclature they are using is caste. Now, you say that caste is bad because it's all about hereditary occupations, right? Yeah. So what about the English occupations? England surnames derived from occupations, hereditary occupations. Most of them originated in medieval towns and villages in England, like Carter, like Hayward, like Thatcher, Smith, Taylor, yeah, Boatwright, Cartwright, Shipwright, Wainwright, Turner, Goddard, Cowherd, Webster, Weaver, Dempster, Franklin, Knight, Marshall, Page, Squire, Chamberlain, Duke, Earl, Pope, Priest, etc. These are all hereditary occupations that have been passed on from generation to generation, just like in India, in England. But in India, it's bad. In England, it's fine, right? Because hereditary passing on of anything is bad, because that is the caste system, apparently. So, I hope I have given enough information for all of you to use your own intelligence to understand what the truth is about. Please do some reading of your own. Please do some deep study of your own. Don't fall prey to dogmatic thinking, which is accepting the results and the products of other people's thinking. Please think on your own. Please study things yourselves. Otherwise, don't come and say such things. Oh, what bullshit you are speaking, Abhijit. I mean, come on. So yeah, that's what I have to say about caste. And about Nepal follows the jati varna system. Jati means whatever lineage you have, essentially gotra. There are various jatis. There's a whole bunch of jatis, hundreds, maybe thousands of jatis in the Indian subcontinent. Yeah, jati. And varna means whatever occupation you have. So various jatis would have different varnas within them. It's a very complex system. The British could not understand it. That's why they oversimplified it into 4 castes. That's what they did. I think I have demonstrated, I have given you enough references. Please study them. Spend a few weeks reading all this. Only then will you understand the truth. It is very easy to misinform people by oversimplifying things. And then to counter the misinformation, you have to study. You need to spend lots of time studying. So in case you respect yourselves and would like to actually learn something, the truth, then please study this. That's what I would recommend and request you to do. Okay, Akshada says, why is China sending monkeys into space? And Samarth says, Samarth is essentially answering the question, but asking a different question. Samarth says, China will be sending monkeys into space to see the outcomes of reproduction up there. What are your thoughts on this? And should India and the rest of the world do it without thinking about ethical issues? We need to explore space mining as well. Aerospace medicine will get a boom in the future. So yeah, to answer Akshada's question, China is sending monkeys, is planning to send monkeys into space to see the effects, see how the environment of zero gravity or microgravity affects reproduction. So they intend those monkeys to reproduce in space. See, right now we are an earthbound species. We make very brief forays into Earth orbit. Only a handful of people have been into Earth orbit, and only a handful of people have broken free of Earth orbit and gone into moon orbit or on the surface of the moon. So, but eventually we would like to become a spacefaring species. For that, we would have to spend extended amounts of time in space, and in the future, maybe we would need to reproduce in space as well, because reproduction is essential to the survival of the human species. And monkeys are our closest relatives. I mean, the apes are even closer, but various monkeys also can serve the purpose. Their biology is very similar to that of humans. So the Chinese want to see. So it means the Chinese are ambitious. They would like to see how it goes. What is the effect of microgravity or zero gravity on the reproductive process of very closely, species that are very close to us? Yeah. So it's all about the long term future. It's all about planning for the future. In the future, we would perhaps want to send human beings on long voyages across space, maybe in the future to a different star system as well, perhaps definitely to Mars. The gravity on Mars is much lower than that on Earth. Yes. And so one way of seeing how it goes is to have monkeys reproduce in space and see what is the outcome. What does it have any uh, does it have any deleterious effects on the viability of the fetus? Is the child born normal, or are there any defects? What is the effect of cosmic rays and the solar radiation, other radiation, on the mother, on the monkeys, on the child? All these things need to be looked at. Yeah. Ethical issues, well, China doesn't really care about ethical issues. um, the Americans also don't care about ethical issues. They have sent monkeys into space. They have various animals must have died in space. The Russians sent the first dog Laika into space, where she died, and so on. Yeah. So and all kinds of nations continue to conduct animal experimentation, which can be extremely cruel. Yeah. So unfortunately, we are the dominant species on the planet, and we humans, we would, I mean, if you look at it culturally, from the Indian cultural perspective, we would never want to do this, but other nations don't have any such qualms, and that's how it goes. So yes, the Chinese will find out what happens, and hopefully we will learn something from that. I mean, I'm sure they'll make the results public. If not, we'll see. So yeah, this is something that is the future. And so yeah, so we do need to explore space mining, which is going to happen perhaps in the next 100 200 years. It's still in the far future, but India needs to establish a presence in Earth orbit, a space station. First of all, we need to start our human space flight program. We need to create our own space station. We need to, as soon as possible, establish a presence on the moon as well, step by step. Yeah. So yes, India needs to catch up. India has the ability, the capabilities to do that. But yeah, we are kind of slightly behind right now, but I'm sure we can catch up rapidly. ISRO is a very capable organization, as we know very well. Okay, we are almost at the 2 hour mark. I had a whole lot of other questions that I wanted to answer. Unfortunately, I'm not able to answer them today because we have reached almost the end of today's live stream. So I apologize to those people whose questions I had selected. They will not know it, but yeah, sorry. Let me take some live chat questions, as is our convention, right? So if you have any questions that you would like to ask me, which you have not asked, then you can ask me right now in the live chat, and I will take a look. I will answer maybe 2 or 3 questions. Uh, yes, ISRO is great. I agree. ISRO is wonderful, and we are very proud of ISRO. Uh, Manohar is saying, bye, sir. Give me 5 minutes, then we'll do bye. I'll take a few questions. uh, okay. Prasad is asking about the Iran hypersonic missile. So the Iranians have declared that they have tested successfully a hypersonic cruise missile, ballistic missile. I'm not sure. It's obviously a cruise missile. Ballistic missiles are ultra hypersonic. Yeah, but the re-entry velocity is about Mach 23 or so, which is incredibly high velocity. So I'm sure they're talking about a cruise missile of some kind, which is a hypersonic missile. Good for them. Did they get help from somewhere? We don't know. Uh, Two places from which they could have possibly got help. One is China, possibly, and one could possibly be Russia. I'm not sure the Russians would want to share such advanced technology with our Parsi friends, but maybe it's the Chinese who did that, because the Chinese are investing big time in Iran. A 40 billion plus dollar uh, deal they've signed recently, and so on, like the past 2 3 years or so, maybe 2018 2019 thereabouts. So or maybe they did it on their own, in which case kudos to them. So Iran is a very ambitious nation. The Iranian government, I'm sure, would like to, in the long run, re-establish some form of the Persian Empire. So yeah, they are a very ambitious nation, and they um, they they have good technology. They've been developing these drones, which are very effective. They've sold those drones to the Shahed, whatever number it is, drones. They sold a bunch of them to Russia, and the Russians are using them in the conflict in Ukraine because they don't want to use the air force and so on. So Iran is doing well. They are developing drones, and they seem to have developed a hypersonic cruise missile. Good for them. Good for them. All right. What else do we have? Chiranjeev says, let's start a movement of burning two books, My Experiments with Truth by Mr. Gandhi and Bharat, Ek Khoj by Mr. Nehru. You know what? Even bad things need to be preserved as an example of what bad is. So, yeah, I mean, burning, which, see, if you burn books and if you ban books, you kind of forget your past. Your past may have been good, it may have been bad. Especially if it's bad, we have to ensure you never forget it. So I would say it would be kind of, I would venture to say that it would be kind of counterproductive to burn books or ban books. Keep them, preserve them as an example of the bad times that India went through. We had people like Mr. Gandhi, we had people like Mr. Nehru, who were not the most ideal, greatest, of course. You know how it is. Not the best examples of leadership. And these books give us insights into their mindset. So it's something we should actually preserve and study, because it gives you an insight into what went wrong with India in the past. That's a beautiful rhino. This one here, yeah, it's a great rhino. I got it from Assam. I'd gone to Silchar, to NIT Silchar, where the wonderful people there presented me with this rhino, and I thought I'd put it over here because it's a great rhino. It's an Assamese rhino. Anybody from Assam? Great. All right, let's take maybe one more question. Oktar says, who is better for India, Imran Khan or Shehbaz Sharif? See, the Pakistan Prime Minister doesn't matter who he or she is. They are more or less powerless. And it's always the army and the ISI that essentially calls the shots. So it doesn't matter. See, Mr. Modi did not ever bother to even have a phone conversation with Mr. Imran Khan. Not even once, if I'm not mistaken. Because it doesn't matter who's in power. It doesn't matter who is the prime minister, because that person is powerless. That person is nothing more than a puppet. So whether it's Imran Khan or Nawaz Sharif or Shehbaz Sharif or whoever else it may be, it doesn't matter. They are all the same for India. Yeah. So that would be my answer. What would I say about China's recent aid to Pakistan? I have been saying that Pakistan is now a US vassal state. So why are the Chinese giving aid to Pakistan? Well, they will try to fight the development, and they will try to throw more carrots at the Pakistanis. They will not give up without a fight. And the Pakistanis, the kind of nation they are always happy to get money from whichever place it comes. But at the end of the day, it all depends on who has the bigger stick and who has the deeper pockets. Do the Chinese have deeper pockets than the Americans, than Uncle Sam? Not at all. Do the Chinese have a bigger stick than Uncle Sam? Once again, no. The Americans have the deeper pockets, and the Americans have the bigger stick. So let the Chinese throw some money, a few $1 billion once again in Pakistan, which is not a donation. This aid, the so-called aid, is actually a loan. It is additional debt that Pakistan is taking. It will have to repay that money. It's not aid, right? So the Pakistanis are digging a deeper hole for themselves in form of more Chinese loans, and that's just how it is. But at the end of the day, they're going to remain US vassals, because now they are useful to the Americans once again, and that's where we are. All right, my dear friends, thank you for all the questions. Thank you for being on the live stream. Thank you very much. And this is the end of today's live stream. I will see you very soon next week, Saturday, Sunday. Until then, take care and see you later. Bye-bye.